Hebrews chapter 11, verse 32.
Yep.
And we begin reading. It says, "And what shall I more say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and of Barak." Now, we talked about Gideon and Barak last week. Of course, we went in a different order. We said Barak and Gideon. So anyway, it mentions Gideon, it mentions Barak. I hope you realize that anyone that's mentioned in this chapter these are like the superheroes. This is like the Legend of Superheroes or something, or the Marvel, the Marvel group that you see on these TV now. Mm-hmm. And Gideon and Barak, men of faith, great men of faith. We also looked at Deborah. We brought up Deborah. But in this same scripture here, it mentions Samson. How many have heard of Samson? Okay, we're going to look at Samson tonight. And Jephthah. Or Jephthah, depends if you're in the New Testament or the Old Testament, but it's the same. So you got Barak, Gideon, Samson, Jephthah, and it also mentions David and Samuel of the prophets. Of course, David is the King David, right? Amen. So we're not going to get to David or Samuel tonight. We'll be lucky to cover what we need to. But let's go to Judges chapter 10. So chapter 10, verse 17, and we're going to start here. Actually, Jephthah is, we first start talking about him in Judges 11, verse 1, but I want to go back 2 verses here. In fact, we'll go back 3 verses. We'll look at, chapter 10, verse 16 through 18 we're going to look at. Because 16 is really important. You saw what they went through last week. The children of Israel kept sinning, and every time it's like the judges come, God delivers them. The judge, dies or passes off the scene, and then they go back into their sin and the worship of false gods. And then so God has to sell them out again, and then they cry out for deliverance, and it goes over and over and over, right?
Cycle.
And it's a cycle, right? So, and one key verse through Judges is every man did what was right in his own eyes. See, a lot of times we think things are right. We do this in the Christian church. We think because we think it's right that it's right. But it's not necessarily right. It's not necessarily according to the Bible. And it's not according to God's morality and God's revelation, right? And that's kind of a reminder here as we go into Judges. But verse 16 talks about Israel. It says, "And they put away the strange gods from among them and served the Lord. And his soul was grieved for the misery of Israel." That's a good thing, right? They put away those strange gods. So then the next thing that happens, they put away these strange gods, but then the children of Ammon were gathered together and encamped in Gilead, and the children of Israel assembled themselves together and encamped in Mizpeh. And the people and princes of Gilead said one to another, "What man is he that will begin to fight against the children of Ammon? He shall be head over all the inhabitants of Gilead." They're looking for a leader.
Yeah.
They don't have a leader. They got an army, but they don't have a leader. And they've repented from the worship of these false gods. But here's the children of Ammon gathered against them. So they're looking for someone to lead them. And they said, whoever it will be the head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. So now we're introduced to Jephthah. And chapter 11, verse 1. Now Jephthah, the Gileadite, was a mighty man of valor. That's really a good thing for God's word to say about you. That you're a mighty man of valor. I just hope some of us are going to hear that when we get up to heaven. You mighty man of valor. And he was the son of a harlot. Well, there's one strike against him, right? He was a son of a harlot. Well, what seems to have happened was he was younger than a lot of his brothers, and looks like his father just went out and is in his older age and slept with a harlot. He was a son of a harlot. Gilead begat Jephthah. And Gilead's wife bare him sons. So now it's talking about the other sons, okay? So Gilead had Jephthah, but his wife's true wife bare him other sons. And his wife's sons grew up, and they thrust out Jephthah. And said unto him, Thou shalt not inherit in our father's house, for thou art the son of a strange woman. Now, if you think that brothers growing up have animosity and conflicts with each other, just try being of a different, woman. They're not having the same mother. And what they did when they grew up, they realized, hey, this guy don't belong in this family. Now, he did belong because they had the same father, but they treated this guy like scum. Did this guy have anything to do with who his mother was? No. And I think that's unfair. You should not hold against someone, whether it's their talents, ability, whatever they have, you got to be careful because you can offend somebody very easy, and you should not blame people for who they are and what they are and where they've been. Right? Encourage them. But they said the brothers unanimously, and it's not only the brothers, we'll see in a minute, it was all of the town. All of the elders of the town said, Thou shalt not inherit in our father's house, for thou art the son of a strange woman. And Jephthah fled from his brethren and dwelt in the land of Tob. And there were gathered vain men to Jephthah and went out with him. Now we just got through reading in verse 1 that he was a mighty man of valor. And you can see that he attracted, it says there were gathered vain men to Jephthah, and they went out with him. These men were gathered to him because of his leadership. Because he was a man's man. If someone was going to be able to be the leader, if someone was going to be able to lead them into military success, this was the guy. But the whole town cast him out. It said, you're not going to have any inheritance with us. So it came to pass in the process of time, the children of Ammon made war against Israel. And it was so that when the children of Ammon made war against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to fetch Jephthah out of the land of Tob. Well, these are the same guys that cast him out. Right. So they said to Jephthah, come and be our captain, that we might fight with the children of Ammon. Why not they go to him? Because they know he's tough. I mean, this guy is downright. Remember when they used to make those Arnold Schwarzenegger movies? He was tough. And this guy was tough. And Jephthah said unto the elders of Gilead, Did not you hate me? Ye hate me? You expelled me out of my father's house? And who's he talking to? The elders came to Jephthah. It says here in verse 5, the elders of Gilead went to fetch Jephthah. So it's not his brothers he's talking about, it's the elders, all the elders. And he said, you expelled me out of the father's house. So the brothers must have went to the elders and said, we don't want him to be associated with our family. Why are you come to me now when you're in distress? Have you ever had a relationship go wrong, and then it's almost like you thought, I don't need them, and then there comes a time when they're the ones you need, and you go crawling back with your tail between their legs, because you need them.
John, can you fix this? Yep.
And these guys, they need him because it's a crisis right now. And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, therefore we turn again to thee now, that thou mayest go with us, fight against the children of Ammon, be our head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. And Jephthah said unto the elders of Gilead, if you bring me home again to fight against the children of Ammon, and the Lord deliver them before me, shall I be your head? In other words, shall I be your captain? Shall I be your leader? That they didn't have a king in those days, but should I be the head? And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, The Lord be witness between us if we do not so according to thy words. So what they're saying is, yes, if you come, lead us into the military campaign, and the Lord blesses and overturns the threat and overturns them, gives us the victory, you will be the head over the whole people. So then Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and captain over them. And Jephthah uttered all his words before the Lord in Mizpeh. And Jephthah sent messengers unto the king of the children of Ammon, saying, what hast thou to do with me, that thou art come against me to fight in my land? So he doesn't go out to battle first. He's going to try some negotiation, some diplomacy, right? And so he asks the children of Ammon, he says, why are you coming against my land, or our land? And the king of the children, verse 13, the king of the children of Ammon answered unto the messengers of Jephthah, because Israel took away my land when they came up out of Egypt from Arnon even unto Jabbok and unto Jordan. Now therefore restore those lands against peacefully. And you know, this is prophetic. Because if you look at the whole crisis, the whole situation in Israel, between the Israel and the Arabs and the Muslims, you find out that this whole thing about the land, it's almost identical. And I believe it's somewhat prophetic. And Jephthah sent messengers again to the king of the children of Ammon, and said unto him, thus saith Jephthah, Israel took not away the land of Moab, nor the land of the children of Ammon. But when Israel came, now listen, because this is the argument today. The land never belonged to them, right? And that's what Jephthah is going to say. He said, this land never even was yours. This was ours. He said, because when Israel came up from Egypt and walked through the wilderness unto the Red Sea and came to Kadesh, Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, let me, I pray thee, pass through thy land. But the king of Edom would not hearken thereto. And in like manner they sent to the king of Moab. But he would not consent. And Israel abode in Kadesh. Then they went, they had to go around the outside. They had to go the long way. Right. Around in both cases. Now, who was Moab and Edom? Those were the sons of Lot. Remember, he had sex with his daughters. And they came by the east side of the land of Moab and pitched on the other side of Arnon, but came not within the border of Moab, for Arnon was the border of Moab. So they weren't trying to start any trouble. All they were trying to get was to the land God was going to give them to promise, and they didn't want to fight. And so they went around. This is in Moses' day. And Israel sent messengers unto Sihon, the king of the Amorites, the king of Heshbon. And Israel said unto him, let us pass, we pray thee, through thy land in my place. Now this is history. This is not happening right now, but he's recalling how they got the land. So Sihon trusted not Israel to pass through his coast. But Sihon gathered all his people together and pitched in Jahaz and fought against Israel. So who's the one that started the war? Sihon started the war, not Israel. And the Lord God of Israel delivered Sihon and all his people into the hand of Israel, and they smote them. So Israel possessed all the land of the Amorites, the inhabitants of that country. So there's where the land first came into their possession. It was by conquest. Well, that land over there that Israel has, that which they've gained, came by conquest. And you know what? They didn't start the war. They were attacked. And they gained the land. Well, now they're saying, give us our land back. And Israel's response is, we've been in this land for 3,000 years. Yeah. You have no claim to the... Of course, everyone wants to deny that Israel... They want to say that Israel didn't even exist until 1948. And that's how long they've been there in the land. But we have the Bible. And the Bible, and archaeology proves these stories are true. And we know, according to what's written here, that it's been 3,000 years they've occupied that land. Now, there was a time where, in Jesus' day, the temple was destroyed and the Israelites were scattered and the land kind of went up for grabs. The Muslims had it, then Rome had it, and then the Holy Roman Empire, and then the Muslims had it again. And then it wasn't until World War I where Britain took it over from the Turks. So verse 22, and they possessed all, and then they gave it to Israel. And they possessed all the coast of the Amorites, from Arnon even unto Jabbok, and from the wilderness even unto Jordan. So now the Lord God of Israel has dispossessed the Amorites from before his people Israel, and shouldest thou possess it? In other words, our God gave us the victory. We overcame the Amorites. We gained all their land. Should we just hand it over to you so you can possess it? This was not your land, and we didn't take it from you. And then this next verse, I love it. He says, will not thou possess which Chemosh thy God giveth thee to possess? Now, Chemosh was the main god of the Moabites. And there's somehow there's a link here with Ammon in the main god of the Moabites, Chemosh. But they worship Chemosh, and Israel worships the true God, right? And he's saying the true God gave us this. Shouldn't you inherit what your God, the one you worship, is going to give you or will give you? And he kind of sticks his finger in their face, right? It's like, Don't come and try to take our land that our God gave us. When you're worshiping a false god, you get what you get. Right? Right. So whosoever the Lord our God shall drive out from before us, them will we possess. And this is Israel's attitude today. Like I said, this chapter is all prophetic. And it's the same. The whole thing is the same argument. And now art thou anything better than Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he ever strive against Israel, or did he ever fight against them? Now this Balak, if you can remember, you remember the Balaam, the prophet who had the mule talk to him? He was disobedient. You remember that? Well, Balak was the one who brought Balaam into the picture. But he would never go up against Israel to war against them. And that's what he's saying. He said, even Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, he never strove against Israel, not about this land. He knew this land wasn't his. If he thought the land was his, then there would have been a war. Then there would have been strife. Right? But there was none. Historically, there wasn't any. And then he brings up in verse 26, he said, while Israel dwelt in Heshbon and her towns, and in Aror and her towns, and in all the cities that be along by the coasts of Arnon, 300 years, why therefore did you not recover them within the time? In other words, you're saying that this once was your land. You had 300 years to go get it, and you did nothing. Why didn't you go get it? And now that we went and got it, now you want it? He said it wasn't it's not your land. Wherefore I have not sinned against thee, but thou doest me wrong to war against me. The Lord, the judge, be judged this day between the children of Israel and the children of Ammon. Well, you can tell who's going to win, right? He called God into account. You know, when you call God on the picture, you better be in the right. Right? Well, he was in the right. And this man is not only tough. This man is not only a military leader. He also is a man of faith. Okay. And you can tell by what we read here that he attributes everything to God. Just like he said, it's our God that gave us this. Shouldn't you get what your God does? And he's always reflecting upon God. He says, I'm not going to give in to you here, which is what Israel does today. They don't give in. So howbeit the king of children of Ammon hearkened not to the words of Jephthah, which he sent him, then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah. So it's not in his power. Now he's a mighty man of valor. He's mighty in his own strength, and he's got military. He's got a whole company of men that followed him. And then this other group, which he was thrown out of, now they wanted to make him the captain and the head over all of them. So he's got all these people behind him. But see, that's not enough. We learned that from Gideon. When Gideon had 10,000 men, and then it went all the way down, got them all the way down to 300, remember? Mm-hmm. Well, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah. The Spirit of the Lord doesn't come upon somebody that God hasn't chosen, right? And he passed over Gilead, and Manasseh passed over Mizpah of Gilead, and from Mizpah of Gilead he passed over unto the children of Ammon. And Jephthah vowed a vow unto the Lord, and said, If thou shalt without fail deliver the children of Ammon into my hands, then it shall be, whatsoever comes forth of the doors of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the children of Ammon, shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. And just a point here, you should never make a vow to God that you have no intention of keeping. Right. You know, sometimes we have this, we've sinned and we have this guilt. And so it makes us feel better in our prayer to say, God, I will never do this again. Or God, I vow this. If you'll forgive me this time, I'll do this, I'll do that. And then you forget about it. Well, you shouldn't be like that. When you make a vow, you don't have to make a vow. A vow is volunteer. You volunteer to make that vow. You should keep it up. Right. Because remember, Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And you're supposed to do what you say you're going to do. Anyway, he says, when I return, whatever comes out of my house, that's what's going to be offered as a burnt offering. So Jephthah passed over verse 32, Jephthah passed over unto the children of Ammon to fight against them. The Lord delivered them into his hands, and he smote them from Aroer till thou come to Minnith, even 20 cities, and unto the plain of the vineyards with a great slaughter. Thus the children of Ammon were subdued before the children of Israel. So did God come through? Sure he did. And you can see Jephthah, the mighty man of valor, who was filled with the Spirit of the Lord, came upon him for this battle. It was all successful. And then Jephthah came to Mizpah unto his house. Now remember the vow. And behold, his daughter came out to meet him with timbrels and with dances. And you know what she was doing? Remember Miriam praising the Lord with a tambourine? That's what she was. She was praising the Lord. And she came out, she's singing to the Lord. She comes out. Obviously, the girl loves her father. Obviously, this father, who the rest of them didn't want, who was the son of the harlot, they cast him away. This was a good father. This was a godly man. He taught his daughter. She's like a woman of faith. I'm surprised she's not there. But watch her attitude. She's the one that comes out of the house, and she was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. And that's kind of just rehearsing. This was his only child, right? So it came to pass when he saw her, he rent his clothes and said, Alas, my daughter, thou hast brought me very low. Thou art one of them that troubleth me, for I have opened my mouth unto the Lord, and I cannot go back. You see why I say you don't make a vow you can't keep. Don't make a vow to a fellow brother that you can't keep. But certainly don't vow to God. You make yourself out to be a fool is what you do. And I didn't call you a fool. I'm saying if you do it, you made yourself to be a fool. And she said unto him, My father, if thou hast opened thy mouth unto the Lord, do to me according to that which has proceeded out of thy mouth. For as much as the Lord has taken vengeance for thee of thine enemies, even of the children of Ammon. This woman, this daughter, she's really faithful to God. She basically says, okay, well, I know you didn't expect me to be the one, but you swore that I would be made a burnt offering. And You go ahead and do it, because God was faithful and delivered the people from Ammon. Now the question is he going to offer up his daughter on an altar? Remember, Abraham offered up Isaac? Yep. Is this Jephthah, is he going to offer up his only daughter? Well, let's see. That was the vow. And she said to her father, let this thing be done for me. Let me alone for 2 months, that I may go up and down upon the mountains and bewail my virginity and my fellows. In other words, let me get all my girlfriends together, and we're going to go up to the mountain for 2 months, and we're just going to mourn for the fact that I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to have a child. I'm never going to have any, offspring. And in Israel, it was very sad time when a woman did not conceive. It was very important. And they all had the desire that they may be in the line of the Messiah. And so I think that's part of it. But she said, let us go for 2 months. Let me and my girlfriends go for 2 months up the mountain. We'll bewail my virginity. And he said, go. And he sent her away for 2 months. She went with her companions and bewailed her virginity up the mountain. And it came to pass at the end of 2 months that she returned unto her father, who did with her according to his vow, which he had vowed. And she knew no man, and it was a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went yearly to lament the daughter of Jephthah the Gilead 4 days in a year. In other words, once a year they would come and lament this daughter of Jephthah, who was so faithful. She stood up. She said, go ahead and do what you swore to God. Now, and it says that he did. Now, the vow was he was going to offer up a burnt offering, right? So if you look at most conservative, and this is surprising, but most conservative Bible commentators will say, yes, he offered her up, because it says that, doesn't it? He says, the father who did with her according, that's in verse 39, according to his vow, which he had vowed. That would imply that he offered her up as a burnt offering. However, I don't agree with the masses of these, even though they're conservative. Thank God we've got some conservative ones out there. But you got to dig a little deeper, I think. Some things on the surface make God look bad. Does God really want him to burn his daughter and offer him like the god Moloch? Like they used to offer up their babies to Moloch and living sacrifice. No, God says in the law, he says, you don't offer up your child, right? It was against the law of Moses to offer up your child. It doesn't make sense. Did he allow Abraham to go through with offering up Isaac? No. Even there, which was so vitally important, God had a substitute, right? The key, I think the solution is, if people would only know about in Leviticus, it talks about, you remember, it says in the Bible, all the firstborn belong to the Lord. And that goes back to, when Egypt, the whole plague about the firstborn, all the firstborn in the household belong to the Lord and are supposed to be dedicated to his service. However, the custom was, God gave the ability for them to bring money and to pay the price to redeem their firstborn. All Jephthah had to do is pay the money at the tabernacle, which was in the law, and that would set her free of her obligation. But he went even further here, because it says that for year after year after year, all the women came out and lamented for four days. Now, if you look in Israeli history, they keep the Feast of Purim, they keep the Sabbath, they keep the Passover, right? They keep all these. But do they keep this mourning year after year after? No, they don't do it. And it doesn't seem like there's anything recorded other than here that they did this thing. But it says in the Bible that they did this year after year after year. And here's what I think. I think that she was dedicated to the service of God. According to the vow, she would never marry. She would be like a spiritual, not a priestess, but a handmaid to the Lord.
The wannabe nun.
Like a nun. And she would remain a virgin. And every year, as long as she was alive, this is what I think. As long as she was alive, the girls came and bewailed with her the sadness of her loss of the virginity, not the loss of it, that she couldn't lose her virginity for 4 days, and then next year they'd come again. But I believe that she lived a nice long life. But here's the thing: Jephthah is the one who vowed, right? Every man wanted to have an issue. Every man wanted genealogy. He wanted sons and daughters, right? And even to today, most men want to be fathers. Now, some of them don't want to take the responsibility afterwards, you know. But Jephthah had one child, and because of what he said on his mouth, he completely cut off his line. Because he only had one child. She couldn't get married. She couldn't have children because of the vow. And so his line was completely cut off. And yet, this was a great man of faith. I know he's a great man of faith because it says so in Hebrews. That's why we're looking at him. Because he's one of the great ones. And there's more about Jephthah, but we're not going to get into it. The thing I want to also bring out is that, remember, what was the significance of the threshold? Remember that? The threshold, the blood was put, and it represented the covenant. Remember that God would protect the house? The threshold was right in front of the door, and the vow was whatever came out of the house. So she came out of the house. She stepped over the threshold, and that was that. That was that. And I think it has something to do with that threshold.
Firstborn.
And maybe that's why God preserved her life, because he's the protector. What would you say?
Because of the covenant, the firstborn.
I believe, yeah, because of the covenant. But and God didn't want a burnt offering. Now, that may not be, but I'm just bringing it out because it doesn't say that she actually came out of the house, which means she walked through the door across the threshold. Let's go to chapter 13, verse 1. And we read, "And the children of Israel did evil." Again, seems to be their lot in life, right? They did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. And there was a certain man of Zorah of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah. And his wife was barren and bare not. And you see that a lot, don't you, in the Bible? The faithful ones, a woman oftentimes is barren. But God comes through. So the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman right there. I mean, that's tremendous. To have an angel of the Lord appear to you? Yeah. "Behold, now thou art barren and bearest not, but thou shalt conceive and bear a son." Wow. So God is on her side. She's going to bear a son. "Now therefore beware, I pray thee, and drink not wine, nor strong drink, and eat not of any unclean thing. Why? For lo, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come on his head. For the child shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines." This is the first Nazarite that we see in the Bible. A Nazarite, it's described in the law that there was this vow of the Nazarite. And the vow of the Nazarite was, when you made a vow to the Lord, you weren't to drink strong drink or drink from the vineyard, the grapes of the vineyard. You weren't supposed to eat anything unclean. That was the law to begin with. But you had to make sure, because that you were supposed to be holy during that time that you were on the vow. But then after the vow, you weren't supposed to cut your hair. But then after the vow, you would shave your head bald, and then you would be released and back to normal life. That was the vow of the Nazirite. But this is one who did not choose to be a Nazirite. God chose him to be a Nazirite. And which meant this man, this son that I'm going to give you, he will be a Nazirite his entire life. In other words, he is separated and holy to me. There's 2 other Nazirites that we know of in the Bible. And it kind of shows you what fellowship or what place he had, right? There's only 3. Anybody know who one of the other ones was?
Male or female?
Just male. Okay, one was the prophet Samuel. Prophet Samuel. Now, when you read about the prophet Samuel, you don't realize that this guy's got hair all the way down his back, right? Because he had to have. Neither did he drink strong drink, right? Neither did he. But he was dedicated his whole life. And he was a tremendous. In fact, he was like, other than Abraham, he was like the first prophet. He was a mighty man. And he's indicated in the book of Hebrews as one of the mighty men. The other one, John the Baptist. Remember him? John the Baptist. And he couldn't cut his hair either. He was a Nazirite.
His hair was long, yeah.
And even when you see the Bible, you know, those Bible movies that they got about the New Testament, they usually have John right. You know, they got him with the long hair and everything.
I think we got ripped off. We got no hair.
Well, you wouldn't want to be under this vow either for the rest of your life. In other words, you don't screw up.
Yeah.
And Samuel and John the Baptist are examples. If you were called, you would be expected to live that kind of life. But we're going to see that Samson doesn't really live that kind of life. He's the first one, though, so let's give him a little credit for that. So now verse 4, now therefore, beware, a warning. I pray thee, and drink not wine nor strong drink, and eat not any unclean. For lo, thou shalt conceive and bear a son. No razor shall come on his head. For the child shall be a Nazirite unto God from the womb. And he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. Then the woman, in other words, he's going to have the Holy Spirit from out of the womb.
Amen.
You remember John the Baptist? He actually he had the Holy Spirit inside the womb.
He jumped and was.
Right. Then the woman came, and Jesus said there was not a greater man than John the Baptist. There was not a greater prophet than John the Baptist on the earth. The woman came and told her husband, saying, a man of God came unto me. Now, her husband wasn't there. So she's a man of God. She doesn't know. He appeared like a man. And I'll tell you, the angels, you know, you see all these pictures about these female angels. But every time there's an angel in the Bible, it appears like a man. You'll see a lot of, in some of these, like the Catholic Church, for instance, they'll have these statues that they pray to of angels. And they usually look like a woman. I don't know where they get this idea, because the Bible always has look like a man. But she says, a man of God came unto me. Well, was the angel a man of God? He was a man in form, and he was from God, right? And his countenance was like the countenance of an angel of God. So she could see there's something magnificent about this guy. Very terrible, but I asked him not whence he was, neither told me his name. But he said unto me, behold, Thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and now drink no wine nor strong drink, neither eat any unclean thing. For the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death. Then Manoah entreated the Lord and said, O my Lord, let the man of God which thou didst send come again to us, and teach us what we will do unto the child that shall be born. So what happened is the angel appeared to the wife. The wife tells the husband goes to God in prayer and said, send him back. I need to see that this really happened. And look at this. God hearkened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God came again. So if you do have an angel come to you, tell God, I want him to come again. I don't know that God will hearken to you. But so he came again unto the woman as she sat in the field, but Manoah was not there. The reason he came the second time was for Manoah, right? But he wasn't around. So the woman made haste, ran, showed her husband, and said unto him, Behold, the man has appeared unto me that came unto me the other day. And Manoah arose and went after his wife, came to the man, and said unto him, Art thou the man that spakest unto the woman? And he said, I am. And then Manoah said, Now let the words come to pass, thy words come to pass. How shall we order the child, and how shall we do unto him? And the angel of the Lord said unto Manoah, Of all that I said unto the woman, let her beware. She may not eat of anything that comes of the vine, neither let her drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean. All that I have commanded her, let her observe. So he's repeating this, right? That she's not to partake of strong drink or drink wine or eat anything unclean. And Manoah said unto the angel of the Lord, I pray thee, let us detain thee until we shall have made ready a kid for thee. And so the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, Though thou detain me, I will not eat of thy bread. And if thou wilt offer a burnt offering, thou must offer it to the Lord. For Manoah knew not that he was an angel of the Lord. So he's making it clear, I will not accept you to worship me. Then why are people praying to angels today? Here's an angel, and the angel says, don't worship the angel, worship God. Right? Don't worship the apparition, worship God. Who's God? The God of the Bible is God. And Manoah said, verse 17, we're in Judges chapter 13, verse 17. Manoah said unto the angel of the Lord, What is thy name, that when thy sayings come to pass, we may do thee honor? Again, he doesn't get it. Now he says, well, what's your name so we can honor you? And the angel's like, you don't need to know my name, right? And the angel of the Lord said unto him, Why askest thou thus after my name, seeing that it's a secret? Now, that word secret, it's in some Bibles, you'll see that it says wonder. It's wonderful, or wonder. Remember in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. In fact, keep your finger in there. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. So you can see it with your own eyes. And it says, For unto us, now I know you've all heard this, for unto us a child is born. We usually hear that around Christmas time, right? Unto us a child is born. Unto us a son is given. The government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful. That's the wonderful counselor, the mighty God, the everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. That wonderful is the same word as this one here where he says secret. Where he says it's a secret. The word actually means more than that. It means his name was hidden. It was too high to be understood. It was marvelous, it was full of wonder, and it was a miracle. And that's what he tried to impress upon him. You don't need to know the name, nor could you ever understand the name. And I don't want you to honor me. I don't want you to offer up any sacrifice to me. I'm a messenger. So Manoah took a kid with a meat offering, offered it up upon a rock unto the Lord, and the angel did wondrously. And Manoah and his wife looked on, for it came to pass when the flame went up toward heaven from off the altar, that the angel of the Lord ascended into the flame of the altar. So when the flame went, he went up with the flame. And Manoah and his wife looked on, and fell on their faces to the ground. But the angel of the Lord did no more appear to Manoah and his wife. Then Manoah knew that he was an angel of the Lord. Well, you should have figured that out already. It looked like he has a little unbelief, right? Even though there's an angel, and the wife could tell. I mean, he obviously radiated with light. And Manoah said unto his wife, we shall surely die because we have seen God. He missed it again. He saw an angel. He didn't see God. He's still confused. But his wife said this. She said, if the Lord were pleased to kill us, he would not have received a burnt offering and a meat offering at our hands. Neither would he have showed us all these things, nor would at this time have told us such things as these. And the woman, and that's a good argument, right? In other words, you don't have to be afraid that this happened. Obviously, if God wanted to kill you, he would have killed you. Right. He came to kill you. He came to announce the birth of Samson. And in verse 24, the woman bare a son and called his name Samson. And the child grew, and the Lord blessed him. The name Samson actually means sun child. S-U-N. Sun child, the bright sun, the child of the sun. Which is interesting because when prophecy talks about Jesus, remember it talks about the son of, he'll be the son of righteousness with healing in his wings. Now he didn't have wings in his extremities, but he was the son, it says not S-O-N, son of righteousness, S-U-N. Why is he named child of the sun? Because Samson's entire life is a prophecy about Jesus Christ. And that's why there's so many things that are hard to understand. There's one thing that comes up in this where Samson likes to play with people's minds with a riddle. And we'll see that. This book is a huge riddle. It's just like a bit, or not the book, but this story of Samson, it's like a riddle. And the riddle equates to his name, child of the sun. His life's going to foretell what's going to happen to Jesus. It's a tremendous prophecy here. And so the Spirit, in verse 25, the Spirit of the Lord began to move him at times in the camp of Dan between Zorah and Eshtal. Now, so you see that the Spirit of the Lord was upon him, right? God said he was going to be with him. He's a Nazirite. God's got to be with him from birth till death. That's the agreement that he made. So in chapter 14, verse 1, Samson went down to Timnath, and he saw a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. And he came up and told his father and his mother and said, I have seen a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me to wife. And it was against the law of Moses for a Jew to marry anything but a Jew. Right. And he wanted to marry a Philistine. He says, get her for me to be the wife. In those days, your parents would do all the work to get you your wife that you wanted. So verse 3, then his father and his mother said to him, now both of them say, is there never a woman among the daughters of thy brethren or among all my people that thou goest to take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines? And Samson said unto his father, get her for me, for she pleases me well. Now this looks totally like a sin, like Samson is like disregarding the law of God. But there's something here again about Samson's life that we don't understand without digging deeper. So in verse 4 he says, but his father, Samson's father, and his mother knew not that this was of the Lord. for Samson to take the bride of the Philistine, this was of God. Even though the law said not to do it, God's Spirit is working His own purposes in Samson. And, of course, it looked like the wrong thing. And you'll see that all the way through Samson's life. It looks like the wrong thing. But God's doing something here. His father and his mother knew not that it was of the Lord, that the Lord sought an occasion against the Philistines, for at that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel. Remember, Israel sinned and God sold them out. Right? So now the Philistines were in control, had dominion. So God raises up Samson as the deliverer. Then went Samson down and his father and his mother to Timnah, and came to the vineyards of Timnah, and behold, a young lion roared against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. Boy, if you ever need a Spirit of the Lord to come upon you, it's when a young lion meets you in the wilderness and going to pounce on you. Did you ever go to the zoo? Did you ever see how big these lions are? This ain't some little kitty cat. One swipe of the paw with those nails, well, they say one swipe of the paw cut your head right off. But the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon Samson, and he tore or rent the lion as if he would have rent a kid. He just grabbed it and wow, just ripped him right in half. And of course the lion gave up. Now he's got two halves of a lion. So he rent him as he would have rent a kid, and he had nothing in his hand. In other words, there was no knife, spear, there was no nothing, no tool that he used. It was by his bare hands. But he did not tell his father and his mother what he had done. And you know, what I find interesting is, it said in the previous verse that Samson was not alone. Samson went with his mother and father to Timnath to get the woman, right? For him to marry. So where was his mother and father? I think that they were over there by the future father-in-law's house talking, what's the dowry? I don't know if you know about a dowry, but in those days when you married a woman, the father wanted money. And so they were probably negotiating that, but Samson was out on his own, and here the lion comes to kill him. And he went down, verse 7, he went down, talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. So up until this time, Samson has never even talked to this woman, but he wants to marry her. And so he goes down there, she pleased him well. I got a feeling that he was attracted all because of her looks.
Me too.
You know? And most men are, right? And you can't fault him for that. And after a time, he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. And behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. So what happened is, the lion was sitting there, and after about 20 days or so, what happens in the wild is the bees will come into a carcass, a dead carcass, and they'll take up residence there, and they'll build their hive in there or whatever, and honeybees we're talking about, and then they'll have honey inside there. And so that's what the bees did. And this is not some special miraculous thing. This is something that bees do. Just like if you have a dead animal in your backyard. Yeah, let's say a raccoon dies, and he's in your backyard, and you just leave him there. Well, he's going to stink, right? Flies. And then flies are going to come on him, and then flies are going to lay eggs, and then eggs are going to turn into maggots. Mm-hmm. You ever smell maggots? Oh man, one thing I hated when I was a kid, I had to do the trash, and I didn't know how these maggots got in the trash. I didn't know they came from flies. Yeah. But they do, and they stink. And then I had to wash out the stupid cans. Anyway, so Samson took thereof in his hands, and he went on eating. In other words, he took some of the honey. Now, how he didn't get stung, I don't know. Maybe it was the Spirit of the Lord. I don't know. He stuck his hand in there. To me, if I wouldn't stick my hand in there. And so then he came to his father and mother, and he gave them, and they did eat, but he did not tell them that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. Why? Because it was against the law to eat something
Dead.
unclean, which a lion was unclean, and dead. In fact, it was against the law to even go and touch something that was dead.
Even touch it, right? Go near a dead carcass was defiling, right?
Yes, exactly. And remember, the vow was he was not only supposed to grow his hair, not drink strong drink or wine, but he wasn't supposed to eat anything unclean. And he not only eats something unclean, he has his mother and father do it. But he doesn't say anything, so I guess they're excused. And I don't, if you ask me, why did he do it? Maybe he didn't know that aspect of the law. I don't know. Because you see that Israel kept falling away and falling away. Obviously, there wasn't a lot of preaching of the word. Or maybe he didn't realize it. I don't know, that was unclean. So his father went down to the woman, and Samson made there a feast, for so used the men to do. So he's having a feast because he's going to get married, right? And it came to, it's a wedding. So it came to pass when they saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. Now in a wedding, the wife-to-be, she has all her bridesmaids, right?
Right.
And it's the same thing here. But he doesn't have any friends. She gives him 30 Philistines that she knows as his best men. Right? Well, there's one that's his best man, and then, the other was standing up at the wedding.
No good, brother.
But he didn't know he could trust any of these guys, right? I've never known anybody that got married that didn't have at least one friend. And Samson said unto them, I will now put forth a riddle. Remember I told you? His whole life is a riddle. But he puts this riddle to these 30 men. He says, I will put forth this riddle if you can certainly declare it to me within the 7 days of the feast. So the feast would last 7 days. And find it out, then I will give you 30 sheets and 30 change of garments. Because there's 30 of them. But if you cannot declare it to me, then you shall give me 30 sheets and 30 change of garments. And they said unto him, put forth thy riddle that we may hear it. So they agreed. Right? And so he said to them, out of the eater came forth meat. Out of the strong came forth sweetness. Well, what's he talking about? He's talking about that lion, right? Out of the eater came forth meat. Out of the strong came forth sweetness in the form of honey, right? But they don't know. They didn't see the carcass. They didn't see the honey. And so this is actually a pretty hard riddle for them to solve. And so they could not in 3 days expound the riddle. And it came to pass on the 7th day that they said to Samson's wife, entice thy husband that he may declare unto us the riddle. Otherwise, or unless we burn thee in thy father's house with fire, have you called us to take what we have? Is it not so? In other words, these guys, they're only concerned about they don't want to pay for the sheet and the change of clothing, the garment, right? And so they threaten, all 30 of them threaten the bride. Say, if you don't find out the answer to the riddle, we're going to burn down your father and you. The whole house, and that's probably more in the family. So she reacts. She's afraid. She don't want to be burned alive, right? So she's going to try to get this information out of Samson. So in verse 16, Samson's wife wept before him and said, thou dost but hate me, and lovest me not. Thou hast put forth a riddle unto the children of my people, and hast not told it to me. And he said unto her, behold, I have not told it to my father or my mother, and shall I tell it to thee? And she wept before him the 7 days while the feast lasted. It came to pass on the 7th day that he told her, because she lay sore on him, and she told the riddle to the children of her people. So the men of the city said unto him on the seventh day before the sun went down, what is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion? So now they solved the riddle, right? But they got the information from her. But Samson knew. He said unto them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, that's his wife, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you had not found out my riddle. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, which means the Lord is in favor of what he's going to do next, right? The Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson. And there's another thing about this guy, Samson. Anytime you see him portrayed, he's usually pretty muscular. But if his strength, if his strength was really because he was all muscular, he's the Arnold Schwarzenegger type or something. Of course, he's a little older now, isn't he, Arnold Schwarzenegger? But then he would have always been strong. But when the Spirit of the Lord came off him, he wasn't so strong. No. So it was the Spirit of God that made him super strong. But the Spirit came on him, the Spirit of the Lord came on him, and he went down to Ashkelon, which is about 23 miles. Okay, he walked. He didn't have none says about he had a chariot or a horse. He walked down 23 miles. He's really angry about this. And you probably see steam coming out of his head. And he killed 30 men in Ashkelon, and gave change of garments unto them which expounded the riddle. And his anger was kindled, and he went up to his father's house. So he says, okay, I'm going to keep my promise. I'll kill 30 of 30 of the Philistines. And you can have so they're wearing dead men's clothes, right? And so Samson figures it's over, his wrath was, his anger was kindled. I would say that stay away from Samson when he's angry. You remember Hulk, you won't like me when I'm angry, that Bill Bixby. But Samson's wife was given to his companion, whom he had used as his friend. In other words, one of these 30, the best man, ended up getting his wife. The father gave him the wife. What kind of a family is this, right? So it came to pass within a while after, in the time of the wheat harvest, Samson visited his wife with a kid, not a little toddler, but like a goat. And he said, I will go into my wife into the chamber. Notice he says wife. So as far as he's concerned, they're married. She was living with her father. He was living with his father. But her father would not suffer him to go into her. And her father said, I verily thought that thou hadst utterly hated her. Therefore I gave her to thy companion. Is not her young... I mean, would you be a little upset? Would you be a little upset if you just got married and you come back to be with your wife and the father-in-law says, hey, I gave her to your best man? You know when the woman, the bride never marries the best man, right?
Wouldn't want to be in that father's shoes.
No, and you're talking about Samson here. And so he gives her wife away. And then he tries to console him, saying, therefore I gave her your companion, but is not her younger sister fairer than she? Well, when he saw this woman, he just fell in love with her because she just turned him on, right?
First sight.
And I'm sure she still turns him on. And her father-in-law gave her away to someone else who's trying to get her to take the younger sister. So now Samson gets angry again. Verse 3, and Samson said concerning them, now shall I be more blameless than the Philistines, though I do them a displeasure. And again, God is behind all this, because God is trying to use Samson to destroy some of these Philistines. And so Samson went out and he caught 300 foxes. King James says foxes, but the word is actually jackals. And took firebrands and turned tail to tail and put a firebrand in the midst between the two tails. Now, nothing says that he did it by himself. He may have had people help him, because 300 is a lot of animals to catch. Right? So he probably had help. He probably used traps. I don't think that he did it all bare hand. So I think there's a whole group of people that worked with him. Maybe he hired them. But it says that he took the tails of two and put a torch on their tails, and then he let them go. Well, what's going to happen? They're going to run against each other, and they're scared, and right? And what happened, he let them go. And verse 5, and when he had set the brands on fire, he let them go into the standing corn of the Philistines and burnt up both the shocks and also the standing corn with the vineyards and the olives. He destroyed it all with fire. Why did he do that? Because his father-in-law gave his wife away and he felt justified, right? So then the Philistines said, who has done this? And so they all answered, Samson, the son-in-law of Timnah, because he had taken his wife and given her to his companion. And the Philistines came up and burnt her and her father with fire. What was she trying to avoid? Why did she didn't want to get burned. She didn't want to.
And she still got it.
That's exactly what happened to her. Right? She fulfilled her destiny. Verse 7, and Samson said unto them, though ye have done this, yet will I be avenged of you, and after that I will see. So now Samson is really mad. Because not only his wife was given away, now they set his wife, now he's got to still love her, and they set her on fire, the house, burned him alive. And he is really angry. He says, I will be avenged on you. And verse 8, and he smote them hip and thigh with a great slaughter. What that means is that he just beat the living tar out of them. That's what it means. And he went down and dwelt in the top of the rock Edom. And then the Philistines went up and pitched in Judah and spread themselves in Lehi. And the men of Judah said, why are you come up against us? So the Philistines were mad, so they came and encamped around Israel. And so Israel says, well, why did you come against us? And they said, to bind Samson are we come up, to do to him as he has done to us. So now all of the Philistines are mad at Samson. They want to get even. So then, verse 11, 3,000 men of Judah went to the top of the rock, Edom, and said to Samson, knowest thou not that the Philistines are rulers over us? What is this that thou hast done unto us? And he said unto them, as they done to me, so have I done unto them. And isn't that the law? An eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth, right? In other words, Samson just saying, hey, I'm just doing what they deserve. I didn't ask for any trouble. They burned my wife alive and her father. So verse 12, and they said unto him, now here's the 3,000 men of Judah, 3,000 of his brothers, in other words. They came down against him and they said, we are come down to bind thee, that we may deliver thee into the hand of the Philistines. And Samson said to them, swear unto me that you will not fall upon me yourselves. And they spoke, no, but we will bind thee fast and deliver thee into their hand. But surely we will not kill thee. And they bound him with 2 new cords, and they brought him up from the rock. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines shouted against him. And here we go with that scripture. The Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him again. So again, this is God working, right? And the cords that were upon his arms became as flax that was burnt with fire. They just fell apart. And his bands loosed from off his hands. And he looked and he found a new, not an old, but a new jawbone of an ass. Or, which, might appropriately be, maybe it's better to say donkey, right? But anyway, it probably still had flesh on it. He took this jawbone, now once again, he's not supposed to touch anything unclean. This thing's dead, right? But he needs a weapon. And so he grabs this jawbone of an ass, and he put forth his hand and took it and slew 1,000 men. 1,000 men. He slew them with the jawbone of an ass. Samson slew 1,000 men with the jawbone of an ass. But, there's many preachers today that do worse with the jawbone of an ass. Because they don't preach the truth. They don't preach the word. Right? And what's that jawbone I'm talking about? Right? You see what I'm saying? Anyway, Samson said with the jawbone of an ass. Now, Samson, he's kind of funny. He makes up a song. Now, you can't see the poetry, and you can only see it in Hebrew. So in English, you really don't get it. But it says, Samson said, with the jawbone of an ass, heaps upon heaps, with the jaw of an ass have I slain 1,000 men. And it's actually a little poem. And it came to pass, when he hath made an end of speaking, that he cast away the jawbone out of his hand. He called the place Ramath-lehi, and he was sore athirst. In other words, he was so thirsty. Think about it. He's out there in the wilderness. He fought 1,000 men. He just killed 1,000 men. And he's exhausted. And he was thirsty, and he called on the Lord and said, Thou hast given this great deliverance into the hand of thy servant, and now shall I die for thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised? But God clave a hollow place that was in the jaw. There came water thereout, and when he had drunk, his spirit came again, and he revived. Wherefore he called the name thereof En-Hakkor, which is in Lehi unto this day. And it says he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines for 20 years. So I believe that verse there, he judged Israel for 20 years. I believe that's when it happened. That's when they accepted him as a judge after he killed 1,000 men. But you know how God miraculously brought forth the water? In other words, if he wouldn't have had that water, Samson would have been dead. Yeah, he still would have killed 1,000 men with the jawbone of an ass, but he would have died himself. Have you ever been so worked, so weak, a drink of water kind of, revives you. So chapter 16 we're in. Then went Samson to Gaza, and he saw there a harlot. Now he's not married anymore, right? He saw a harlot. He went in unto her. And I don't know why he did that, except for I believe that everything that he did was of the Lord. And it was prophetic. And I'm going to show you that before we get out of here. And it was told the Gazites, saying, Samson is come hither. And they compassed him and laid wait for him all night in the gate of the city. Were quiet all the night, saying, in the morning when it is day, we shall kill him. So in other words, in the morning when light comes, he's with the harlot. He's sleeping with the harlot. When he comes out of there in the morning, we'll kill him. So Samson lay until midnight. And then he gets up. He arose at midnight. And he took the doors of the gate of the city and the two posts and went away with them, bar and all, and put them on his shoulders, carried them up to the top of a hill that is before Hebron. In other words, do you know what he did? He not only grabbed that, he put it on his back, and he carried it for 55 miles. Archaeology says the city gate was probably about 60 feet high. It wasn't just a gate. 60 feet high. Archaeological evidence indicates the city gates in this period of time were usually made from parallel pairs of massive stone blocks. The post and bar would probably have been solid cedar. Overall, we're talking about several tons of weight. In other words, he picked up at least 2 or more tons of weight and carried it for 53 miles. Wow. Or 55 miles or whatever it was. Uphill. Yeah, and it was uphill. That's right. And it was uphill.
And this was after being with a woman, and they say you lose your strength.
That's right. He went into her, yeah. So it came to pass afterward that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Why, Delilah. You heard that song? And we have to ask why Delilah, right? But Delilah wasn't the harlot. The harlot was this other woman. But Delilah actually made herself to be a harlot. Because remember, she accepted a bribe to try to get the goods on Samson, right? And you'll notice that Samson, he's got an eye for the women. You know, that's why he got an eye for the women. And once again, I can't criticize him for it. Know that God has a plan here. But it looks bad. It looks bad, right? The lords of the Philistine came to Delilah and said to her, entice Samson and see wherein his great strength lies, and by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him. We will give thee, every one of us, 1,100 pieces of silver. And there's 5 cities. That's why they say every one of them. In other words, all 5 of us are going to give you 1,100 pieces of silver. Now that doesn't mean a whole lot to us unless we realize that 10 pieces of silver was the average wage for a year for a man. She got 5,500 of them. So 500, she got 550 years worth of wages. In other words, she was pretty rich. She became Donald Trump.
Right? She wasn't cheap.
No, she was. We say she was a hooker. She was a harlot. She was a mastermind to get that kind of money, right?
Yeah, a mastermind, right?
And Delilah said to Samson, tell me, I pray thee, wherein thy great strength lieth, and wherewith thou mightest be bound to afflict thee. Now you would think that Samson would be smart enough to catch on here, right? And Samson said to her, if they bind me with 7 green withs that were never dried, then shall I be weak and be like other men. Then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 green withs which had not been dried, and she bound him with them. And now there were men lying in wait, abiding with her in the chamber. And she said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. After she binds him up. And he wakes up and he breaks the withs as a thread. The toe is broken when it touches the fire. So his strength was not known. In other words, this had no effect on his strength, right? So Delilah then said again to Samson, behold, you have mocked me. Did you ever know a woman that would just keep nagging? This woman, Delilah, she must have been beautiful, but man, she was nagging him. So she goes, behold, and you know how they got those eyes, and you can't hardly resist, right? He said, behold, thou hast mocked me and told me lies, and now tell me, I pray thee, wherewith thou mightest be bound. And he said to her, if they bind me fast with new ropes that never were occupied, then shall I be weak and be as other men, as another man. And so Delilah therefore took new ropes, bound him therefore, and said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And there were liars in wait, abiding in the chamber, and he brake them from off his arms like a thread. So that had nothing to do with his strength. And so Delilah is really getting perturbed. And she says to Samson, hitherto, or until now, thou hast mocked me. You told me lies. You say you love me, but you... Right? I mean, that's one of the phrases you'll hear, right? You say you love me, but you told me lies. You tell me wherewith thou mightest be bound. And he said unto her, if you weave the 7 locks of my head with a web. So she fastened it. Remember, she has these great long hair, and he keeps them in 7 locks.
Braids.
7 braids, exactly. And she fastened it with the pin and said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he waked out of his sleep, went away with the pin of the beam and with the web. And she said to him, how can you say I love thee when thy heart is not with me? Thou hast mocked me these 3 times and hast not told me wherein thy great strength lieth. And so it came to pass when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him so that his soul was vexed unto death. In other words, this woman wouldn't give up. Well, you wouldn't give up either for 5,500 or 550 years of wages. So just think, let's say you make $50,000 a year, multiply that times 550. And just think what you could do with that. So she's relentless, right? So then he said, he told her all his heart and said unto her, and now why this guy didn't see? 3 times she set him up, right? And he doesn't see it. And he says, there has not came a razor upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. And so when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up this once, for he has showed me all his heart. Then the lords of the Philistines came up with her and brought the money into her hand. She made him to sleep upon her knees. She called for a man, that she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head. She began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. And she said, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awoke out of his sleep and said, I will go out as at other times before and shake myself. And he wist not that the Lord was departed from him. So when that hair was cut, God left. And he was like any other man. And that's what I'm saying. He wasn't strong. He was no stronger than any other man. The strength was God, and now God's Spirit departed from him. But the Philistines took him and put out his eyes. So they took like a red-hot poker out of fire, and they burned his eyes. And they brought him down to Gaza and bound him after his eyes were cauterized. They bound him with fetters of brass, and he did grind in the prison house. In other words, they stuck him in this prison house, and he just walked. You know what a grinder is? He just walked around a circle. That's what he did all those years.
Conan.
Like Conan, yeah. It was like that movie Conan, yeah. They put out his eyes, and he did grind in the prison house. Verse 22, howbeit the hair of his head began to grow again after he was shaven. And you could see that all this was in God's planning, right? Then the lords of the Philistines gathered them together to offer a great sacrifice unto Dagon, their god. Their god was Dagon.
Right.
Dagon is the fish god, if you don't know. He's the fish that walks around like a man. And he wears fish hats. The priests wear those fish hats. You see those same hats that like the Pope has and the cardinals? That's the same thing, the same hats they used to wear for Dagon. They not only had the hat, it comes up with two things. That's like a mouth. It's supposed to be in the mouth of the fish. That's what that represents. Then the lords of the Philistines gathered them together to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon their god, and to rejoice. For they said, our God has delivered Samson our enemy into our hand. Everyone in all the Philistines knew who Samson was after all this. And so they said, Dagon delivered him to their hands. And when the people saw him, they praised their God. See, they were in the temple, and there's this great big statue of Dagon. And so they said, our God has delivered into our hands our enemy and the destroyer of our country, which slew many of us. And it came to pass, when their hearts were merry, they said, call for Samson, that he may make us sport. In other words, let's get him out here. Let's make fun of him. Mock him. They figure he's as weak as he was when he went in there. And they called for Samson out of the prison house. Of course, he's blind. What can a blind man do? Out of the prison, he made them sport, and they set him between the pillars. So this temple that they were at, there was 3,000 Philistines, and the whole architecture was stood on 2 pillars that ran down. And Samson asked to be put between the 2 pillars so he can rest. But he's got a plan of God, right? Because I don't know if you've seen the movie. There's a new movie out, by the way, and I would recommend it, but I haven't seen it, but I would recommend we go see it because it's supposed to be based on the Bible. And he gets his hands, about like this between the 2 pillars. And if he's got extra strength, he can push those pillars. And when he pushed those pillars, the whole thing comes tumbling down. And that's what happens there. See, now the house was full of men and women. All the lords of the Philistines were there. And there were upon the roof about 3,000 men and women that beheld while Samson made sport. And Samson called unto the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once, O God, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistine for my 2 eyes. And Samson took hold of the 2 middle pillars upon which the house stood, and on which it was borne up, of the one with his right hand and the other of his left. And Samson said, Let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were therein. So the dead which he slew at his death were more than that which he slew in his life. Is that tremendous? And he was blind. We're going to quickly review so you remember the main point, because there were 10, I don't know if you're counting them, but there were 10 feats of strength and heroism. And 3 of them mentioned the Spirit of the Lord. There was, remember, the killing of the lion, the killing of the 30, that was in chapter 14, verse 5 through 9. The killing of the 30 Philistines was in chapter 14, verse 19. The burning of the fields was in chapter 15, 4 through 6. The slaughter of the Philistines in chapter 15, 7 through 8. He escaped from the ropes and killing of 1,000 men. Remember 1,000 with the jawbone of an ass. Chapter 15, verse 14 through 17. The Gaza gate, where he took that two or more ton gate and walked about 53, ripped it off and took it and walked about 53 miles uphill. And then he escaped from the bowstrings in 16:9. He escaped from the new ropes in 16:12. He escaped from the loom in 16:14. And then the final feat was final destruction of the 3,000 Philistines, chapter 16, verse 27 through 30. Now, I said in the beginning of this, as we're going into Samson, that I believe that the whole story of Samson is a prophecy about Jesus Christ. It's a veiled, it's a riddle, it's veiled, but let me show you why I believe that. I'm going to go through what these things I think represent. Number 1, Samson was said that he would come by a supernatural birth. Didn't Jesus? Number 2, his mother was visited by angelic messengers who proclaimed his birth. Sound like Jesus? Number 3, he will be holy and separated to God from the womb. Just like Jesus. He will eat no unclean thing. In other words, he'll have no sin. Now, Samson did eat the unclean, but there's a reason for it. Remember Jesus, when he hung on the cross, says the scripture said Jesus became sin for us. So he did eat something unclean. In the beginning he had no sin, but he did sin. His father had great doubts, asked God for an angelic messenger to be sent to them again. His parents offered the blood sacrifice for themselves. Parents asked the angel's name, and he replied, it's a secret. Remember, we said, and we went to a scripture that said, remember, Jesus' name was Wonderful. Same name as the angel revealed. Wonderful Counselor, the mighty God. His power was not in the flesh, but the Spirit of the Lord began to move him. That's the same with Jesus. In fact, Jesus couldn't do anything his first 30 years until he went and was baptized by John in the Jordan. And then the Spirit of God came upon him, right? And then he was able to do all these miracles. He came looking for a pagan Gentile wife, which corresponds to Jesus coming and going to the Gentiles for church, his bride. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines. It was a mystery known only to God. Doesn't that sound like the New Testament? They didn't know. Israel didn't know. When he came, they rejected him. Well, they had to reject him, so he be nailed to the cross. The young lion attacked him in the wilderness, but he overcame him by the Holy Spirit on his way to find his Gentile bride. Well, who does the lion represent? Satan. Satan came out things began to work and the parents went to get him a wife, the Gentile wife, Samson was almost slain by the wild animal, by the lion. What happened when the Spirit came upon Jesus after he was baptized? He went into the wilderness where he was tempted for 40 days, 40 nights, and Satan came as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And it was almost like Jesus just ripped him to shreds, just like Samson. By slaying the evil one, the promises and blessings are enabled to come forth. In the Bible, it talks about the blessings being a land of milk and honey. So the honey came forth because the slaying of the evil. The meaning of out of the eater, I believe, is death. So, because the eater, when you eat something, that you could be death incarnate. So out of the eater means death, and out of the eater came forth food. So it was by Jesus, through Jesus' death, comes forth food, spiritual food for us. Of the strong one came forth sweetness. Samson proposes a great riddle to the Gentiles, which is also not known to his parents. They could not in 3 days expound the riddle, which prophetically is of his resurrection. So 3 days, they didn't understand the riddle. Most of the Jews rejected him even after those 3 days, right? Fearing her own life from the threats of her own people, his wife turned against Samson. What's going to happen to the church in the tribulation? You read in the book of Revelation, after the rapture, those who remain, most of them are going to sell out. They're going to become part of Babylon. Babylon the Great, the whore. So he slew his Gentile enemies and gave them a change of garments. His wife was given to his companion, whom was once his friend. Now I have here, as Christ's own wife has been handed over to the organized worldly church system. His wife was handed over to his companion. Christ's bride will be handed over to the worldly church system. Those that do not escape. Upon his return, he is offered another wife. When Jesus comes back, there's another wife waiting for him. You know who it is? Babylon the Great. Because she claims to be the true church. But she's the false church. She's the false wife. So he's offered somebody another wife. Babylonian system corrupted the church, which the world esteems as much more beautiful. Remember, the father said, "Look at the younger sister; she's much more beautiful." Well, when you look at the Babylon the Great in the book of Revelation, doesn't she? She appears to be really beautiful. Jackals with burning tails represent fire and plagues and warning of further judgment. Don't we see that in the book of Revelation? Samson would now physically slaughter them as judgment. Interesting that the unfaithful wife was turned over to the fire. Where's Babylon the Great going to be turned over to? Fire, right? Samson, just like Christ, is turned over to the Gentile kingdom to do whatever they will. When Jesus was arrested. Then the Spirit came upon him. He was free of all the devil's attempts at killing him. 1,000 are slain by the jawbone of a dead donkey. And I have here, through his death, Jesus' death, all of his enemies are to be defeated. In his own strengths, he would have failed. Talking about Samson. But God opens up living waters of the Holy Spirit to revive him. The same is true of Jesus. Jesus couldn't do anything by himself. He needed the living waters of the Holy Spirit, just like you do. As Samson judged Israel for 20 years, Jesus will judge all the earth in the millennium. Samson went into a harlot, symbolizing Jesus became as sin for us. And although he became sin at midnight, he broke the gates of the city and went 50 plus miles, the gates and bars of hell, and he left the kingdom of darkness undefended. Let me say that again. So when Samson broke the gates of the city, this referred to what Jesus was going to do in hell. The scripture says he would descend into hell, and he broke the gates of hell. Now Satan has no defense. And he left the kingdom of darkness undefended. And remember, he said he translated us from the darkness into the kingdom of light.
When he took the doors, and went up to 53 miles, when he got to the top, what did he do with it?
I guess he just threw him on the ground. That just shows his anger. Okay. Have you ever been so angry you walk 53 miles? I don't know. I can't walk 53 miles. Anyway, the name Delilah. Did you ever wonder what the name Delilah means? Amorous, a delight, a temptress. Synonyms would be romantic, lustful, sexual, erotic, amatory, ardent, passionate, and impassioned. Samson willingly surrendered himself to weakness by dishonoring the Nazirite vow. Right. Jesus willingly surrendered himself to be nailed on the cross. The Gentiles put his eyes out. Does that sound like, and threw him into prison? What happened to Jesus? For 3 days and 3 nights, his eyes were out. He died. I mean, his body died. Now, nobody took out his eyes, but I believe that symbolized the death of Jesus. So it implies that Christ would die. Samson was bound in prison as Jesus was bound in hell. Although they mocked him, as the world mocks Christ today, choosing the fish god Dagon. Everybody thinks that's the true church. Samson brings the temple of Dagon down upon all of them, killing the multitude. And that's what Jesus is eventually going to do when he returns. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines, the Gentiles." And so the dead which he slew at his death were more than which he slew in his life. And that's true of Jesus. And so, I mean, I don't know if you counted them, but I had 32 things that I can see that prophetically speak about Jesus in this story. That's why it's hard to understand. And when you hear people teach about it, usually they tell you how Samson was such a sinner. And they miss, this is prophetic of Jesus. They missed the point. Jesus was born holy, but became sin for us. Even though he was perfect, he took our sin upon him. Now, Samson can't do that, so to symbolize it, God has him sin. And he becomes unclean. But God never left him because it was all in God's plan.